The radar signature appeared at 3:47 hours, 30 miles southwest of the contested airspace over the Black Sea. Lieutenant Colonel Vera, Phantom, Kozlova watched the blip materialize on her multifunction display, her gloved fingers dancing across the controls of her F-22 Raptor with practiced precision. The signature was wrong, too clean, too deliberate for the usual Russian probing flights that had become routine along the NATO border. Mongoose lead, this is Phantom. Single contact bearing 270, Angels 25, speed 480 knots. Her voice carried the measured calm of someone who had seen combat over the mountains of Afghanistan, though most of her squadron mates knew her only as the quiet pilot who transferred from transport duty 6 months ago. Copy Phantom. Maintain position and observe. Colonel Marcus, Mongoose. Henderson's response crackled through her headset, tinged with the subtle dismissiveness she'd grown accustomed to. 3 combat tour flying C-130s into hot zones apparently counted for little when you were the only woman in a squadron of elite air superiority pilots. The mystery aircraft began a descending turn, its radar return fragmenting in ways that made Vera's pulse quicken. She'd seen this pattern before, during classified briefings about advanced stealth technology, but the briefings had been theoretical, until now. Mongoose lead, contact is exhibiting anomalous RCS patterns. Request permission to close for visual identification. She kept her voice level, professional, even as her tactical mind raced through possibilities. The aircraft's behavior suggested either mechanical failure or something far more troubling. Negative, Phantom. Hold position. We've got 2 more birds inbound to establish proper intercept protocol. Vera's jaw tightened. Protocol. Always protocol when you were the outsider proving yourself daily. She maintained her assigned patrol sector, watching as the unknown aircraft continued its erratic descent toward international waters. Something nagged at her, a detail from her pre-flight briefing that hadn't seemed important until this moment. Wing 22. The designation had appeared in casualty reports from a classified mission 3 weeks ago. A prototype aircraft lost over the Baltic during what official channels termed routine training exercises. No details, no explanations, just another line item in the endless ledger of military secrets. The radar contact flickered again, and for a split second, Vera caught something impossible on her infrared sensors. A heat signature that pulsed in a specific pattern, 3 long, 2 short, 3 long. International distress code. But that would mean the pilot was alive, had been alive for 3 weeks in an aircraft everyone assumed was destroyed. Her finger hovered over the radio transmit button. Speaking out of turn could end her career in the Raptor program, but staying silent might mean abandoning someone who had become a ghost in military databases while still breathing somewhere in the sky above the dark waters below. The dawn sky stretched endlessly ahead, holding its secrets like a jealous lover. Vera made her choice and keyed the microphone, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to set in motion. Mongoose lead, I need to tell you something about that contact. The radio silence that followed felt like the pause between lightning and thunder, pregnant with the promise of storms to come. Vera watched her radar screen, where the impossible had become terrifyingly real, and prepared to explain how the dead had learned to fly again. She'd built her reputation on precision and reliability, 2 qualities that had kept her alive through countless supply runs into contested airspace. Now, starring at readings that challenged everything she understood about modern warfare, Vera realized that her most important mission was just beginning. The mystery aircraft's descent steepened, its signature fragmenting further as it approached the wave tops 20,000 feet below. Time was running out, and with it, any chance of solving a puzzle that had haunted intelligence analysts for weeks. In the cockpit of her F-22, surrounded by the most advanced avionics ever created, Lieutenant Colonel Vera Kozlova prepared to confront ghosts that refused to stay buried. Colonel Henderson's voice finally broke the silence, carefully controlled but edged with something that might have been concern. Phantom, elaborate on your previous transmission. What exactly do you know about this contact? Vera took a breath, feeling the weight of her career balancing on the next few words. Sir, the thermal signature matches archived data from Wing 22, the aircraft we lost 3 weeks ago during Operation Nightfall. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a crash site. Wing 22 had been classified beyond her clearance level, but transport pilots heard things, saw things, filed reports that disappeared into black filing cabinets. She'd flown supply runs to the airbase where Wing 22 had been stationed, had seen the unusual hangar configurations, and the personnel with no names on their uniforms. That's impossible, Phantom. Wing 22 was confirmed destroyed over the Baltic. We have satellite imagery of the debris field. Yes, sir, but this contact is exhibiting the exact RCS profile from the Wing 22 technical specifications. The radar absorbent materials, the angular deflection patterns, it's identical. Vera's training in electronic warfare, earned during her years flying through contested airspace, had taught her to read signatures like fingerprints. The pause stretched longer this time, filled with the subtle static of encrypted communications. Vera knew Henderson was conferring with higher authorities, possibly reaching pay grades that existed in unmarked buildings with no windows. The mystery aircraft continued its descent, now passing through 15,000 feet with mechanical precision that suggested either autopilot engagement or a pilot with superhuman composure. Mongoose 2 and 3 maintain overwatch positions. Phantom, you're cleared to close to visual range, but do not, repeat, do not, attempt direct contact without authorization. The order surprised her. Vera had expected to be pulled back, replaced by pilots with higher security clearances and fewer questions. Instead, Henderson was trusting her tactical judgment, perhaps recognizing that her unique background in transport operations might provide insights that pure fighter pilots lacked. She adjusted her heading, the Raptor responding with the fluid grace that still amazed her after 6 months of flying the world's most advanced air superiority fighter. The aircraft's stealth characteristics meant she could approach undetected, but something told her the pilot ahead already knew she was coming. The infrared signature pulsed again. 3 long, 2 short, 3 long. SOS in international code, transmitted through heat variations that would be invisible to most sensors. Whoever was flying that aircraft possessed both technical sophistication and operational awareness that suggested extensive training. Elite training. As she closed the distance, Vera's tactical display began painting a clearer picture of the contact. The aircraft's configuration was unlike anything in current service, a hybrid design that seemed to blend characteristics of multiple airframes into something entirely new. The radar-absorbent coating was failing in patches, creating the fragmenting signature she'd first noticed, but the underlying structure remained largely intact. At 5 miles separation, her optical sensors finally achieved lock-on. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat, challenging everything she thought she knew about the mission that had supposedly ended with Wing 22's destruction over the cold waters of the Baltic Sea. The aircraft limping through the dawn sky was indeed Wing 22, but it carried modifications that hadn't appeared in any briefing she'd attended. Additional antenna arrays clustered along the fuselage, and the cockpit configuration suggested extended endurance capabilities. This wasn't just a prototype fighter. It was a platform designed for missions measured in weeks, not hours. Mongoose lead, visual contact confirmed. It's definitely Wing 22, but... Vera hesitated, trying to process the implications of what she was seeing. Sir, this aircraft has been modified for long-duration autonomous operations. The pilot may have been surviving on internal systems for the entire 3 weeks. The revelation carried weight beyond mere technical specifications. If Wing 22 had been operating independently for 3 weeks, what had it been doing? What mission could possibly justify leaving a pilot isolated in hostile airspace for so long? And why had official channels declared the aircraft destroyed when it was clearly still operational? Henderson's response came weighted with new urgency. Phantom, can you identify the pilot? Any visual confirmation of crew status? Vieira adjusted her approach angle, bringing her Raptor alongside the damaged aircraft at a respectful distance. The cockpit appeared intact, but the canopy's polarization made it impossible to see inside clearly. She was about to report negative visual contact when the mystery pilot's aircraft waggled its wings in the traditional aviation greeting between military aviators. Someone was definitely alive in there. Someone who had survived 3 weeks alone above hostile waters, maintaining operational discipline despite being officially declared dead. The implications sent a chill through Vieira's chest that had nothing to do with the thin air at 20,000 feet. Mongoose lead, contact is responding to visual signals. Pilot appears conscious and aware. Recommend immediate medical evacuation protocols. But even as she spoke the words, Vera realized the situation was far more complex than a simple rescue operation. Wing 22's extended operational capability, its unauthorized modifications, and its survival in contested airspace suggested a mission that existed outside normal command structures. She was looking at either the most successful black operation in recent history or the most catastrophic intelligence failure. The dawn sky stretched endlessly around them, holding secrets that could reshape her understanding of modern warfare. In the cockpit of her F-22, Lieutenant Colonel Vera Kozlova prepared to learn truths that carried the weight of classification levels she'd never dreamed existed. As she maintained formation with the Ghost aircraft, Vera's tactical mind began connecting fragments of intelligence she'd gathered over months of flying support missions to classified facilities. The unusual personnel rotations, the equipment manifests that made no sense, the briefings that ended when transport pilots entered the room, all of it suddenly formed a pattern that pointed toward operations existing in the shadows between official military doctrine and political necessity. Wing 22 wasn't just a prototype aircraft. It was the operational heart of something larger, something that required pilots to disappear from official records while continuing to serve in ways that couldn't be acknowledged. The pilot beside her had become a ghost not through death, but through a mission so classified that success itself had to be buried beneath layers of official denial. Colonel Henderson's voice crackled through her headset with new tension. Phantom, we're establishing a secure corridor for emergency landing. Follow heading 090 to Ramstein Air Base. Medical and technical teams are being scrambled. Copy Mongoose lead. But sir, this pilot has been operational for 3 weeks. Whatever Wing 22's mission parameters, they've been fulfilled under extreme conditions. This isn't just a rescue, it's an intelligence goldmine. The acknowledgement came after a longer pause, filled with the weight of decisions being made at levels far above squadron command. Understood, Phantom. Continue escort duties and prepare for extensive debriefing upon landing. This operation is now classified compartmented information. Standard protocols are suspended. Vera felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with crossing into black operation territory. Her career had been built on following orders and maintaining operational security, but something about Wing 22's survival nagged at her tactical instincts. The pilot beside her had endured 3 weeks of isolation while maintaining mission readiness, a feat that spoke to training and dedication that transcended normal military parameters. As they began their approach toward Ramstein, the mystery pilot's aircraft began transmitting on emergency frequencies. Not distress calls, but data packets in encrypted bursts that suggested mission intelligence gathered over weeks of covert operations. Wing 22 hadn't been surviving in hostile airspace. It had been working, collecting information that intelligence analysts would spend months interpreting. The implications were staggering. While official channels mourned the loss of an experimental aircraft, its pilot had been conducting operations that could reshape strategic understanding of contested regions. The question that haunted Vera as she escorted the Ghost toward safety was simple but profound. How many other lost assets were still operational in the shadows, serving missions too sensitive for acknowledgement? The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the pre-dawn mist and illuminating a sky where the impossible had become routine. Lieutenant Colonel Vera Kozlova, call sign Phantom, had stumbled into a world where death was sometimes just another form of classification, and where the most successful missions were those that never officially happened. The runway at Ramstein appeared ahead, surrounded by emergency vehicles whose crews had no idea they were about to encounter a pilot who had officially died 3 weeks ago. As Wing 22 began its final approach, Vera realized her own life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Some discoveries carried the weight of classification levels that transformed witnesses into participants, and she was about to learn what it meant to become a guardian of secrets that could never be fully told. In the cockpit of her F-22, escorting a Ghost toward an uncertain future, Vera prepared for the most important landing of her career. The morning sky held its breath, waiting to release secrets that would reshape everything she thought she knew about duty, sacrifice, and the price of serving missions that existed beyond the boundaries of official acknowledgement. The wheels of Wing 22 touched down on Ramstein's runway with the gentleness of a pilot who had maintained peak operational skill despite weeks of isolation. Emergency teams surrounded the aircraft immediately, but their urgency was tempered by protocols that had been hastily rewritten in the 30 minutes since Colonel Henderson's initial contact with higher command. Vera circled overhead, watching the controlled chaos below through her aircraft's sophisticated optics package. The pilot of Wing 22 had shut down systems with methodical precision, following checklists that suggested muscle memory maintained despite extraordinary circumstances. When the canopy finally opened, revealing the figure inside, Vera felt her breath catch in recognition. Major Elena Ghost Petrov had been presumed dead for 3 weeks, her loss mourning privately by a community that couldn't officially acknowledge her existence. Vera had met her briefly during a classified briefing 6 months ago, remembering a pilot whose reputation for precision and innovation had earned respect even among the elite test pilot community. As Ghost was helped from her aircraft by medical personnel, she looked up toward Vera's circling Raptor and raised her hand in a brief salute. The gesture carried weight beyond military courtesy. It was acknowledgement between pilots who understood that some missions existed in spaces between official recognition and personal sacrifice. Phantom, you're cleared for landing. Report to Building 4A upon arrival for immediate debriefing. Henderson's voice carried new formality that suggested the involvement of agencies whose names didn't appear on standard organizational charts. The landing was routine, but everything that followed transcended normal military procedures. Vera was escorted directly from her aircraft to a facility that existed in the gray spaces of Ramstein's official layout, where personnel wore uniforms without identifying markings and asked questions that revealed the scope of Wing 22's true mission. Over the next 4 hours, she learned that Ghost had been conducting deep reconnaissance operations that pushed the boundaries of international law and technological capability. Wing 22's modifications had enabled surveillance missions that gathered intelligence on weapons systems, troop movements, and strategic installations across 3 countries, all while maintaining the fiction of being a destroyed prototype aircraft. The operation's success had depended on absolute secrecy, requiring Ghost to maintain radio silence while operating in contested airspace for weeks. Her survival had required not just technical skill, but psychological resilience that few pilots possessed. The distress signals Vera had detected weren't calls for rescue. They were scheduled data transmissions that confirmed mission objectives were being met. Major Petrov's work over the past 3 weeks has provided intelligence that will influence NATO's strategic planning for the next decade, explained a civilian analyst whose credentials Vera wasn't cleared to know. Her decision to maintain operational security despite extreme isolation demonstrates dedication that goes beyond normal parameters of military service. But as impressive as Ghost's technical achievements were, Vera found herself more interested in the human cost of such missions. 3 weeks of isolation, maintaining peak performance while officially dead, required psychological strength that transcended normal training. The pilot she'd escorted to safety had sacrificed not just comfort and safety, but her very existence in official records. When Vera was finally allowed to meet with Ghost directly, she found her in a medical facility that felt more like a safe house than a hospital. Despite 3 weeks of limited rations and minimal sleep, Ghost maintained the alert composure that marked elite pilots, though her eyes carried depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal operational parameters. "I heard you were the one who spotted my thermal signals," Ghost said, her voice carrying the slight hoarseness that came from weeks of minimal communication. Most pilots would have dismissed them as equipment malfunction. "Most pilots haven't flown supply runs into contested airspace for 3 years," Vera replied. "You learn to read signs that don't make it into standard training manuals." The conversation that followed revealed the true scope of Wing 22's mission and the personal cost of operations that existed beyond official acknowledgement. Ghost had volunteered for assignment that required her to disappear from normal military records, becoming a ghost in service of missions too sensitive for traditional chain of command oversight. The hardest part wasn't the isolation or the technical challenges, Ghost admitted. It was knowing that if something went wrong, there would be no official record of my service, no recognition of the mission's importance. I was serving my country while officially not existing. Vera understood the weight of that sacrifice in ways that surprised her. Her own struggles for recognition within the fighter-pilot community suddenly seemed trivial compared to Ghost's willing embrace of anonymity in service of classified operations. The courage required to serve missions that could never be acknowledged publicly represented dedication that transcended normal military valor. As evening approached and the scope of Wing 22's intelligence value became clear, Vera realized she had become part of something larger than a simple rescue operation. Her discovery of Ghost's survival had potentially saved not just a pilot, but intelligence assets that could influence strategic planning for years to come. The debriefing sessions continued into the night, revealing layer after layer of operational complexity that challenged Vera's understanding of modern military operations. Wing 22 represented a new paradigm in warfare, where individual pilots operated with unprecedented autonomy in service of missions that pushed the boundaries of international law and technological capability. But beyond the strategic implications, Vera found herself changed by her encounter with Ghost's dedication to service that transcended official recognition. The pilot who had survived 3 weeks in hostile airspace, while officially dead, had demonstrated a form of patriotism that existed beyond medals, promotions, or public acknowledgement. In the secure facility at Ramstein, surrounded by personnel whose names she would never know and briefed on operations she could never discuss, Lieutenant Colonel Vera Kozlova began to understand what it meant to serve missions that existed in the shadows between official policy and operational necessity. The morning's routine patrol had transformed into an introduction to warfare's hidden dimensions, where the most important victories were those that could never be celebrated publicly. As the sun set over Ramstein Air Base, casting long shadows across runways that had seen decades of military history, Vera prepared for a new phase of her career. The discovery of Wing 22's survival had marked her as someone capable of operating in the gray spaces between official doctrine and classified reality, a recognition that would reshape her understanding of service and sacrifice. The secure conference room at Ramstein buzzed with activity as intelligence analysts pored over data streams that Wing 22 had collected during its 3-week odyssey. Vera watched the process unfold, realizing that Ghost's survival represented just the visible tip of an operational iceberg that extended deep into classified waters. The reconnaissance data confirms our worst suspicions about Russian deployments along the Baltic corridor, briefed a Navy commander whose uniform bore no name tags. Major Petrov's persistence in maintaining mission parameters, despite presumed communications failures, has provided intelligence that satellite surveillance couldn't capture. Ghost sat at the conference table with the composed alertness that marked professional soldiers, her survival gear replaced by standard flight suits that seemed inadequate after weeks of self-reliance in hostile airspace. Despite medical evaluations that cleared her for duty, something in her eyes suggested experiences that would take time to fully process. The question now is how to capitalize on this intelligence without compromising the operational security that made Wing 22's mission possible, continued the briefing officer. Major Petrov's official status as deceased provides cover for follow-up operations, but it also limits our response options. Vera found herself studying Ghost's reactions to discussions about her continued non-existence in official records. The pilot, who had endured 3 weeks of isolation, was now being asked to extend that sacrifice indefinitely in service of operational security. The personal cost of such dedication seemed to weigh on Ghost despite her professional composure. "Sir, what about Major Petrov's family?" Vera asked, surprising herself with the question. Her official death status affects more than just military records. The pause that followed her question revealed the human complexity underlying classified operations. Ghost's parents had been notified of her death 3 weeks ago, her service record closed, her personal effects distributed according to military protocol. Maintaining operational security meant extending their grief for the sake of missions they could never understand. Family notifications are handled through specialized channels, the briefing officer replied carefully. Personnel involved in deep classification operations undergo extensive preparation for extended non-acknowledgement periods. But Vera could see the cost in Ghost's carefully controlled expression. Professional dedication had a price that extended beyond personal sacrifice to encompass the emotional well-being of loved ones who couldn't be told that their daughter, sister, friend was still alive and serving with distinction in ways that couldn't be acknowledged. The briefing continued with technical discussions of Wing 22's intelligence value, but Vera found her attention drawn to the human dimensions of operations that pushed individual sacrifice beyond normal military parameters. Ghost had volunteered for missions that required her to disappear not just from enemy detection, but from the official recognition that sustained most military careers. As the meeting concluded, Vera was assigned to a debriefing team tasked with analyzing the operational lessons learned from Wing 22's extended mission. Her role would involve working directly with Ghost to document techniques and procedures that could enhance future deep reconnaissance operations, an assignment that would extend her involvement in classified programs beyond the original rescue. Colonel Kozlova, your background in transport operations and your tactical awareness during today's encounter suggest you're suited for expanded roles in our program, explained an Air Force general whose presence indicated the highest levels of command interest. Major Petrov will need a liaison officer familiar with both conventional operations and classified protocols. The assignment represented professional advancement beyond Vera's expectations, but it also meant accepting involvement in operations that existed outside normal military acknowledgement. Like Ghost, she would be serving missions that could never be fully discussed, celebrated, or officially recognized despite their strategic importance. Over the following days, as Vera worked with Ghost to document Wing 22's operational lessons, she gained deeper appreciation for the psychological challenges of serving in classified shadows. Ghost's technical competence was matched by emotional resilience that had sustained her through weeks of isolation while maintaining peak operational effectiveness. The hardest moments weren't the mechanical failures or the close calls with enemy aircraft, Ghost explained during one of their sessions. They were the quiet times when I wondered if anyone would ever know what we accomplished out there, whether the intelligence we gathered would make any difference in the larger strategic picture. Vera understood that uncertainty in ways that surprised her. Her own career had been built on measurable achievements, successful missions, safe landings, effective supply deliveries. Ghost service existed in spaces where success couldn't be measured by conventional metrics, where the most important victories were those that prevented conflicts rather than winning them. The technical debriefing revealed the sophistication of Wing 22's modifications and the innovation Ghost had demonstrated in adapting to equipment failures during her extended mission. Solar panel arrays had been jury-rigged to extend electrical power. Water reclamation systems had been optimized beyond design specifications, and communication equipment had been modified to transmit intelligence bursts while maintaining mission security. But beyond the technical achievements, Vera found herself impressed by Ghost's tactical adaptations to prolonged isolation. The psychological techniques for maintaining alertness, the decision-making frameworks for operating without command guidance, the risk assessment protocols for extended autonomous operations, all represented innovations in military psychology that could influence training programs for decades. Major Petrov's survival techniques and tactical adaptations represent a new paradigm in extended operations, Vera wrote in her preliminary report. Her ability to maintain operational effectiveness while psychologically isolated suggests training potential that could enhance deep reconnaissance capabilities across multiple service branches. The report would disappear into classified databases, read by analysts whose names she would never know, but its implications would influence training programs and operational doctrine in ways that could affect military effectiveness for years to come. Ghost's sacrifice had produced not just intelligence, but innovations in human performance that transcended her specific mission. As their working relationship developed, Vera began to understand the personal qualities that had enabled Ghost's survival in circumstances that would have broken most pilots. Technical competence was essential, but psychological resilience required character traits that couldn't be taught through standard training programs. I volunteered for Wing 22 because I believed in the mission's importance, Ghost explained during one of their evening discussions. But sustaining that belief through 3 weeks of isolation required faith that went beyond professional duty. I had to trust that my sacrifice would serve purposes larger than my personal recognition or comfort. That faith had sustained Ghost through mechanical failures, enemy encounters, and the psychological pressure of operating without official support or acknowledgement. Her dedication represented a form of patriotism that existed beyond public recognition, service that transcended personal advancement or career consideration. The debriefing process revealed not just operational lessons, but insights into human potential that challenged Vera's understanding of military service. Ghost's achievement suggested that individual dedication could accomplish missions that seemed impossible when measured against conventional training and doctrine. As the classified analysis neared completion, Vera realized that her encounter with Wing 22 had introduced her to warfare's hidden dimensions, where the most important battles were fought by individuals whose service could never be fully acknowledged. The morning's routine patrol had evolved into an education in sacrifice that transcended normal military parameters. The final debriefing session took place in a conference room whose windows had been covered with materials that suggested conversations requiring the highest levels of security. Ghost sat across from Vera, and a panel of officers whose credentials remained classified, her composure reflecting 3 weeks of isolation that had tested human endurance beyond normal parameters. Major Petrov's mission success rate exceeded all projections despite operating conditions that pushed equipment and personnel beyond design specifications, summarized the lead analyst. Her tactical innovations and psychological resilience have provided insights that will influence special operations training for the next decade. But as impressive as the technical achievements were, Vera found herself most affected by Ghost's quiet dedication to missions that existed beyond public recognition. The pilot who had endured weeks of isolation, while officially dead, had demonstrated a form of service that transcended normal military valor. The intelligence gathered during Wing 22's extended operations has confirmed strategic assessments that will influence NATO planning for years to come, continued the briefing. Major Petrov's willingness to maintain mission parameters despite extreme conditions has provided capabilities that conventional reconnaissance couldn't achieve. Ghost received the recognition with the same professional composure she had maintained throughout her ordeal, but Vera could see the emotional weight of serving missions that could never be fully acknowledged. The pilot who had survived 3 weeks in hostile airspace while maintaining peak operational effectiveness had sacrificed not just comfort and safety, but the normal recognition that sustained most military careers. As the briefing concluded, Vera was offered assignment to a classified program that would involve working with pilots like Ghost on missions that pushed the boundaries of individual capability and international law. The opportunity represented professional advancement beyond her expectations, but it also meant accepting service in shadows where success couldn't be measured by conventional metrics. Colonel Kozlova, your tactical awareness and professional competence during Wing 22's recovery suggest you're suited for expanded roles in our program, explained the program director. Major Petrov will need liaison officers who understand both conventional operations and the unique challenges of classified missions. The assignment would require Vera to disappear from normal military records, becoming a ghost herself in service of operations that existed between official policy and operational necessity. Like Ghost, she would be serving missions whose importance couldn't be acknowledged publicly, whose success would be measured in conflicts prevented rather than battles won. Over the following weeks, as Vera transitioned into her new role, she worked closely with Ghost to develop training protocols that could prepare other pilots for extended isolation missions. The psychological techniques, technical innovations, and tactical adaptations that had enabled Wing 22's success would become the foundation for a new generation of deep reconnaissance operations. The most important lesson from my experience wasn't technical or tactical, Ghost explained during one of their planning sessions. It was learning to find purpose in service that transcends personal recognition, missions whose importance can't be measured by conventional standards. That lesson resonated with Vera in ways that surprised her. Her own career had been built on measurable achievements and professional advancement, but Ghost's example suggested forms of military service that existed beyond normal recognition or reward. The dedication required to serve in classified shadows challenged conventional understanding of military valor. The training program they developed emphasized not just technical skills and tactical competence, but psychological resilience that could sustain pilots through extended isolation while maintaining operational effectiveness. Ghost survival techniques became the foundation for protocols that could enable other pilots to serve similar missions without the improvisation that had marked her own experience. Wing 22's success demonstrates that individual pilots can accomplish strategic missions that seem impossible when measured against conventional training, Vera wrote in her program assessment. Major Petrov's achievements suggest human potential that transcends normal military parameters when properly developed and supported. The assessment would influence training programs and operational doctrines in ways that could affect military capabilities for decades. But its most important insight concerned the human dimension of warfare that existed beyond technological sophistication or tactical innovation. Ghost survival had demonstrated that psychological resilience and professional dedication could overcome obstacles that defeated conventional approaches. As their partnership developed, Vera began to understand the personal cost of serving missions that existed beyond official recognition. Ghost's sacrifice extended beyond 3 weeks of isolation to encompass a career that would never receive public acknowledgement despite achievements that could influence strategic planning for years to come. The hardest part of serving in classified operations isn't the danger or the isolation, Ghost admitted during one of their conversations. It's accepting that your most important contributions will never be recognized publicly, that your family will never fully understand the significance of your service. That acceptance required faith in purposes larger than personal recognition, dedication that transcended normal career considerations. Ghost's example suggested forms of patriotism that existed beyond public celebration, service that found meaning in strategic outcomes rather than individual advancement. The program they developed would prepare other pilots for similar sacrifice, creating a cadre of aviators capable of serving missions that pushed the boundaries of individual capability and international law. Wing 22's success had demonstrated the potential for such operations, but scaling them would require systematic development of psychological and technical capabilities that exceeded normal training parameters. As the classified program expanded, Vera found herself changed by her involvement in operations that existed between official policy and operational necessity. Her discovery of Ghost survival had introduced her to warfare's hidden dimensions, where the most important victories were achieved by individuals whose service could never be fully acknowledged. The morning's routine patrol that had begun with a mysterious radar contact had evolved into a career transition that would define the rest of her military service. Lieutenant Colonel Vera Kozlova, call sign Phantom, had become a guardian of secrets that could never be fully told, a participant in operations whose success would be measured in conflicts prevented rather than battles won. In the secure facilities at Ramstein, surrounded by personnel whose names would never appear in official records, Vera prepared for missions that would test human potential beyond conventional parameters. The sky that had once seemed like a battlefield was now revealed as a theater for operations that transcended normal military doctrine, where individual sacrifice served strategic purposes that could influence global stability for decades to come. The partnership between Phantom and Ghost had begun with a rescue that challenged normal operational procedures, but it had evolved into collaboration that would reshape special operations training and tactical doctrine. Together, they were developing capabilities that could enable a new generation of pilots to serve missions that existed in the shadows between official recognition and strategic necessity. As autumn approached and their training program neared implementation, Vera realized that her encounter with Wing 22 had transformed not just her career, but her understanding of military service itself. The pilot who had survived 3 weeks in hostile airspace, while officially dead, had demonstrated forms of dedication that transcended normal military valor, service that found meaning in purposes beyond personal recognition or public celebration. The classified program they had developed would prepare other aviators for similar sacrifice, creating capabilities that could influence military effectiveness while remaining invisible to public scrutiny. Wing 22's success had proven the potential for such operations, but realizing that potential would require systematic development of human and technical capabilities that exceeded conventional training standards. In the secure conference rooms of Ramstein Air Base, where classified conversations shaped the future of military aviation, Lieutenant Colonel Vera Kozlova and Major Elena Petrov worked to ensure that Ghost's sacrifice would enable other pilots to serve missions whose importance could never be fully acknowledged. Their partnership had begun with a mysterious radar contact on a routine morning patrol, but it had evolved into collaboration that would influence special operations doctrine for decades to come. The sky above remained unchanged, an infinite canvas where aircraft traced their paths according to missions both visible and hidden. But for those who served in its classified shadows, every flight carried the potential for achievements that could reshape strategic understanding while remaining forever beyond public recognition. In that hidden war, victory was measured not in battles won, but in conflicts prevented through sacrifice that could never be fully told. The morning sun rose over Ramstein Air Base, illuminating runways where aircraft prepared for missions both acknowledged and classified. In the secure facilities where Ghost and Phantom continued their work, the partnership that had begun with a rescue had evolved into collaboration that would influence military aviation for generations to come. The sky held its secrets, but those who served in its shadows ensured that freedom's most important victories would continue to be won by pilots whose names would never appear in history books, whose achievements would be measured in the safety of nations rather than the recognition of individuals. Their story would never be told in its entirety, but its impact would resonate through decades of military service, inspiring aviators who would follow in their contrails while serving missions that existed beyond the boundaries of official acknowledgement. In the hidden war that raged above the clouds, Lieutenant Colonel Vera Kozlova and Major Elena Petrov had demonstrated that the most important battles were often fought by those who could never be honored for their victories, whose service transcended recognition in pursuit of purposes larger than personal glory.